If you're hearing this right now, it's not by accident. There's a reason you clicked, a reason you're still here. Maybe you've disappeared lately, not physically, but emotionally. Maybe your phone rings and you don't answer. Maybe you're in a room full of people but feel like a ghost. Maybe you're posting less, talking less, explaining nothing. And maybe that's exactly what you need. You don't owe the world a constant version of yourself. You don't owe anyone an update, a check-in, a status report. You're allowed to retreat. You're allowed to go quiet. You're allowed to rebuild in the shadows, without applause, without a map, without needing to explain a single thing. Because sometimes, disappearing is how you begin again. We grow up believing that visibility equals progress, that being seen is the same as being valid. We chase the spotlight, thinking that clarity only comes when the world confirms we're on the right path. But clarity, real clarity, often arrives in the quiet. It shows up in the stillness when no one is watching. It whispers truths the noise was too loud to let you hear. Sometimes it doesn't look like progress. Sometimes it looks like sleeping in, turning your phone off, cancelling the plan, changing your number, closing the door, and sitting with the silence long enough that it starts to feel like home. You're not behind. You're just being rerouted. You're not late. There comes a point when pretending gets heavier than disappearing, when smiling through the ache becomes a weight you can no longer carry, when replying, "I'm fine," feels like a betrayal to your own soul. So you stop. You stop performing. You stop explaining. You stop showing up to places where your spirit feels out of place, and in that stop, there is power. Silence is not the absence of life, it's the beginning of real life. It's the part they don't teach you about, the holy pause, the intentional withdrawal, the quiet rebellion that says, "I don't need to be seen to exist," because in this disappearing, you begin again. You begin without the noise, without the pressure, without the algorithm deciding your worth. You begin on your own terms, and this time, it's real. When you start to disappear, you'll feel resistance. People will question you. Some will guilt you. Others will forget you. Let them. Not everyone is meant to come with you to the next chapter, and not everyone deserves access to your healing. This isn't about being liked, it's about being whole. And wholeness often requires solitude. You might lose things on this path, connections, momentum, comfort zones, old identities. Let them fall. Let it all fall. Because what's crumbling isn't the real you. It's the mask. It's the performance. It's the borrowed expectations that were never meant to fit. You are not your routine. You are not your career. You are not the version of yourself others prefer. You are the awareness beneath all of that. And that awareness needs space to breathe. Disappearing doesn't always mean vanishing. Sometimes it just means shifting, pulling back, doing things differently, saying no, not replying, choosing peace over people-pleasing. It's refusing to be constantly available, to be constantly productive, to be constantly digestible. You are allowed to be a mystery again. You'll notice the seasons changing, not outside but within. The urgency fades, the panic dissolves, the comparison stops. You'll look at your life not as a race, but as a ritual. Every step, slow. Every moment, sacred. You start to feel your breath again. You start to hear your thoughts again. You start to see your reflection and recognize it, not as who you've been pretending to be, but as someone returning home. And home is not a place. It's a state of being where you no longer perform. You'll start to build differently this time, not out of fear, not out of scarcity, not to prove something, but from rest, from alignment, from enoughness. You'll plant roots in silence. You'll water your own soul. You'll realize that starting over doesn't mean starting from scratch. It means starting from wisdom. Because the version of you that disappears always returns transformed. You're on your own timeline, and that timeline does not require validation. Everyone else might be sprinting toward the finish line, but what if you were meant to walk? What if your detour is the destination? There is something powerful about walking away quietly, something strong about becoming unavailable. You're no longer wasting energy trying to be understood by those who were never meant to hear you clearly. Maybe you're not lost. Maybe you're on a sacred pause. A pause the universe placed on your life because something greater is preparing you for the next level. Do not rush this season. This silence, this emptiness, is not a void. It is preparation. It is calibration. It is the rebuilding of your inner architecture. You don't need to bounce back. You don't need to explain the silence. You don't need to justify your distance. Your absence is doing sacred work. The cocoon doesn't apologize for not being a butterfly yet. It simply trusts the process. So should you. Right now, someone you know is wondering why you've changed. They're misreading your silence, assuming you're angry, or broken, or lost. Let them. Your silence is not their concern. Your healing is not a group project. This journey is solo, and it's sacred. You are allowed to be unavailable while you repair. You are allowed to be selective with your energy. You are allowed to protect your peace, even if it makes you misunderstood. Have you noticed how the world rushes to fill every moment with noise? Every silence becomes awkward. Every break in conversation must be filled. Every empty day must be scheduled. But maybe, just maybe, silence is not the enemy. Maybe silence is the cure. There's something profoundly healing about disappearing from the noise and remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. You weren't born to be constantly online. You weren't designed to be consumed. You are a soul, not a signal. So fade out, close the tab, unplug, and listen. Do you hear it? That's your real life, trying to get your attention again. The further you pull away from the noise, the more you hear the voice that matters. Not theirs, yours. The voice that has been waiting patiently behind the roles, behind the deadlines, behind the masks, whispering, "I'm still here." And when you hear it, really hear it, you might cry. Not out of sadness, but out of recognition. Because it's been so long since you've met yourself. You've become so good at survival that you forgot how to live. You forgot how to move slowly, how to feel deeply, how to want something, not because it looks good, but because it feels right. But now, in this space you've carved by disappearing, you start to remember. You start to remember what your actual laugh sounds like. Not the polite one, not the filtered one, the real one, the one that escapes without permission. You remember what rest feels like when it's not guilt-tripped, when it's not earned, when it's simply allowed. You remember that you're allowed to not be available, to not explain, to not keep up. You remember that the point of life was never to be visible, it was to be alive. You begin to move differently. You no longer chase people who drain you. You no longer seek rooms that require shrinking. You no longer try to be everything for everyone. You choose peace. Again and again and again. And that choice, that silent, persistent, unglamorous choice, rewires everything. It teaches your nervous system that safety is not found in constant approval. It teaches your spirit that rest is not laziness. It teaches your heart that love doesn't need performance. And slowly the old patterns fall away. The urgency, the over-explaining, the need to be needed, the shame around saying no. You learn that a slow life is not a small life. You learn that disappearing from what drains you is a form of devotion. You become intentional, selective, rooted, not in fear but in knowing. Knowing who you are when no one is looking, knowing what matters when no one is clapping, knowing how to begin again from the inside out. This is not an escape, it is a return, not to who you used to be, but to who you always were. And now, for the first time in a long time, you're ready to meet yourself again, fully, bravely, quietly, without the noise, without the script, without the mask, because sometimes disappearing is how you come home. It's strange how absence teaches presence, how only when you disappear do you notice what's real, not the curated feeds, not the endless comparisons, but the simple things, the breath in your chest, the way the sunlight hits your wall in the morning, the silence that no longer feels empty. At first, solitude stings. It brings up the voices you tried to outrun. But slowly, as you sit through the discomfort, you realize those voices aren't yours. They're echoes of fear, shadows of expectation, and one by one, they begin to fade. You stop needing constant distraction. You stop craving the approval of strangers. You stop fearing being alone with your thoughts because your thoughts, raw, unfiltered, unshaped by algorithms, are finally beginning to sound like you again. There's something sacred about pulling away, not out of bitterness, not out of spite, but out of reverence for your own soul. Because the truth is, you were never meant to be everywhere, for everyone, all the time. You were meant to be here, now, with your breath, with your heart, with your truth, whatever that may look like today. There's a freedom that only comes when you stop trying to be understood, when you stop performing, when you allow yourself to simply exist, unpolished, unfiltered, unapologetically quiet. This isn't giving up. This is surrendering to stillness, to simplicity, to your actual self. You begin to listen differently, not just to others, but to your own inner currents. You recognize when your energy contracts. You sense when a space isn't safe. You trust the quiet no inside your chest. You start removing yourself from tables where your presence is only valued when it's convenient, from conversations that don't hold your truth, from roles that ask you to shrink. And in doing so, you make space for breath, for clarity, for alignment. You stop clinging, you stop chasing, you stop explaining. You start being. Being is the beginning. The sacred beginning you were always meant to reach, not through applause, but through solitude. And as you stay with yourself, you realize that this disappearing was never about escape. It was a return to presence, to truth, to you. There is a moment in every silent journey when you realize you're not missing out. You're stepping in. While the world rushes forward, chasing noise, chasing metrics, chasing validation, you are stepping into presence, into depth, into the unshakable awareness that not everything fast is progress, and not everything loud is truth. You begin to notice what truly matters, not just in concept but in practice. The way your breath slows when you're aligned, the way your body softens in safe spaces, the way your intuition speaks clearly when the world grows quiet. You stop forcing what doesn't flow. You stop tolerating what drains you. You stop confusing chaos with connection. The disappearance wasn't about vanishing, it was about filtering, refining, rebuilding. There is no applause in this phase, no highlight reel, no dopamine rush. There is only the internal shift, the one that no one sees, but everything in your life begins to reflect. The way you wake up differently, the way you speak to yourself more gently, the way you stop grasping for clarity from others and start generating it from within. This is what rebirth looks like in slow motion, and it's not always pretty. Some days will feel empty, others will feel isolating. Some mornings you'll question if you made the right choice walking away from what once felt like everything, but then a quiet peace arrives, a stillness that doesn't leave, a knowing that doesn't waver. You realize you don't need to be known to be whole. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You don't need to be seen to be significant. Your life can be quiet and still be meaningful. Your days can be slow and still be sacred. Your journey can be hidden and still be holy. Let others chase the spotlight. Let others run toward noise. You are learning the power of disappearing, not as an escape, but as a return to your rhythm, a return to your essence, a return to the parts of you that never needed to be marketed to matter. This is where your real life begins. Not in the feed, not in the comments, not in the metrics, but here, in the silence you once feared and now call home. You don't have to be on display to be growing. There is a kind of transformation that happens in the quiet, the kind that leaves no timestamp, no headline, no before and after photo. But it is real. It is lasting. It is yours. You begin to notice that life doesn't need to be broadcasted to be beautiful. Moments don't need validation to have value. And healing doesn't require witnesses, just courage. You've been conditioned to believe that progress should be visible, that success should be shared, that you owe the world your every move, your every update, your every milestone. But you don't. You owe yourself honesty, you owe yourself peace. You owe yourself the grace to begin again, even if no one knows you're doing it. Let your journey be sacred, not performative. Let your growth be felt, not flaunted. Let your healing be private but powerful. The disappearance wasn't about becoming invisible. It was about becoming indivisible, whole, rooted, awake. You stop trying to explain your evolution to those who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop auditioning for rooms that don't value your quiet power. You stop shrinking to fit narratives that were never yours to begin with. And in that stop, that full stop, you discover an opening. A space wide enough to breathe, wide enough to feel, wide enough to become. You start to trust that what's meant for you will not require distortion. It will not require noise. It will not require urgency. It will come quietly, naturally, in alignment. Not when you chase, but when you listen. Not when you perform, but when you surrender. Not when you broadcast, but when you simply begin, from within. Because the real beginning never happens in public. It happens in the dark, in the quiet. In the still space where nothing is certain, but everything is possible. Somewhere along the way you realize that disappearing wasn't the end of your story. It was the necessary pause between chapters. You weren't running away. You were returning to your breath, to your boundaries, to your being. You needed to step outside the noise to hear your own narrative again, because when life gets too loud, your voice gets buried. And when your voice is buried, your truth becomes someone else's idea of who you should be. But now, you're remembering. You're remembering what your soul sounds like when it's not rushed. You're remembering how your body feels when it's not bracing for impact. You're remembering how sacred it is to protect your peace, even if it makes you a mystery to others. You no longer confuse busyness with importance. You no longer mistake attention for connection. You no longer equate visibility with value. Now you see that some of your deepest growth happened in the seasons that looked the most still. Some of your greatest healing came when you stopped trying to prove you were okay. The world may celebrate performance, but your soul celebrates presence. And presence isn't loud, it's rooted, it's aware, it's whole. You don't need the world to clap for your silence. You need only to sit inside it long enough to hear yourself again, to feel the weight you've been carrying, to grieve the versions of you that served their purpose and have now expired, to celebrate not just where you're going, but how far you've come, even if no one noticed. You are no longer in the business of being impressive. You are in the process of becoming whole, and wholeness isn't always shiny. Sometimes it's messy, sometimes it's boring, sometimes it's invisible, but it's real, and it's enough, and it's yours. Let the world wonder. Let them misunderstand your silence. Let them write their own stories about why you disappeared. You know the truth. You disappeared because it was time to return to yourself. There will come a moment, quiet, unannounced, when you'll feel it, a shift, not loud, not dramatic, not something you can post, but undeniable, a sense of alignment, a soft exhale, a moment of peace that doesn't need to be earned. You'll wake up and realize you are no longer trying to outrun yourself. You're no longer waiting for the next version of you to feel worthy. You are enough, not someday, not when, but now. The silence has done its work. It held you. It taught you. It stripped away what wasn't true and handed you back what was. You no longer need to prove anything to anyone. You no longer need to explain why you went quiet. You no longer seek applause for choosing yourself, because you've discovered something rare in this world. Peace that isn't dependent on being seen. Purpose that isn't tied to performance. Love that starts from within. You might still walk alone for a while, but now the silence is not your cage. It's your cathedral. It's not your punishment. It's your protection. Not your absence, but your sanctuary. And from this place you begin again, not as someone trying to be more, but as someone finally remembering they already are. You return with new eyes, with a slower heartbeat, with boundaries that hold, with a soul that no longer seeks permission to breathe. This is the gift of disappearing. It's not about fading away. It's about stepping into the space where your true self can finally speak. And this time, you're listening. You're ready. Not for the world, but for yourself. So take one last deep breath in the dark. And when you're ready, don't rush back. Walk gently. Walk slowly. Walk wisely. because you are no longer who you were. And the world you return to is about to meet someone who knows the value of silence and the power of starting over, quietly.